All right. Okay. It's recording now. So what we're going to do today is go over the sort of the Plato assignment and the thinking behind doing Plato as an assignment. Hey Taha, how are you?
Hi, Mom. How are you? How are you? Good.
Good.
I'm good.
I'm good. It's good to see you this morning. Um the reading that we're doing on Plato is really tricky. Like, this is not an easy thing to read at all. It's definitely written for a different audience than us. It's definitely kind of stilted and strange, but despite all of that, I still want all of you to try and read it. So you have 3 assignments today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and show you what you need to do. Give me just a second. And I should be sharing sound this morning. So now you guys can see my teams. Yay. Let me move this around. Okay. So the allegory of the cave is what we're reading. And we're reading like a really old translation of it. And the translation is in dialogue form. So it's people talking to each other through this thought experiment. And the thought experiment is an interesting one. So basically Plato's asking some really interesting questions, and the allegory sort of works to help us figure out how to answer them. The first thing that I'm going to do is play a really very strange claymation video that illustrates how the allegory works. I just show this because I think it's scary and I like it. And then we'll kind of talk about the assignments. So let me go ahead and
imagine prisoners that have spent their entire lives chained deep inside a cave. They have been chained so that they cannot see behind themselves, and they are forced to stare endlessly at the cave wall in front of them. Behind them, a fire is burning, and between the prisoners and the fire is a raised walkway. Now imagine that each day, a menagerie of objects crosses the walkway. Animals, and people carrying their wares to market. Their shapes create an intricate shadow play on the wall in front of the prisoners. This is the only world that the prisoners have ever known. The shadows and the echoes of unseen objects. Now, imagine that a prisoner is released. After some time adjusting to the blinding light, the freed prisoner will begin to experience the world outside of the cave for the very first time. And it is like nothing he could have ever imagined. With his new perception of the world, the man will of course want to return to his friends to share his incredible discoveries. But the prisoners cannot recognize their old friend. He appears as all things do. His voice is a distorted echo, and his body is a grotesque shadow. They cannot understand his fantastic stories of the world outside of the cave. To them, it will never exist. This, of course, does not make the world outside of the cave any less real.
I love that video so much. It's beyond strange, but like you can't see the video, you could just hear the audio. That's weird. All right. Well, you heard the weird story then, and you couldn't see anything. That's sort of appropriate for the allegory of the cave. So this is an allegory, meaning like most of the elements in the story, in the dialogue, have some sort of like other, they're symbolic of something else. And it's a thought experiment. So this is Plato sort of thinking through his ideas about sort of education and the body and how we learn about Bahia. Okay, I've got to type a really quick message. Give me a sec. Okay. So he's telling us these really interesting things about or he's posing these really interesting questions about sort of how do we learn about the world and how do we know things. First things first. So like my first question to all of you is, so Plato was a philosopher, a classical Greek philosopher who lived a really, really long time ago. Do you know, is there anybody alive today that you would consider a sort of contemporary or modern philosopher? Does anybody jump to your minds? You can either say it or put it in the chat. Anybody got any ideas? Who counts as a philosopher?
Did you say like a modern philosopher? Like
Yeah,
in this
yeah. I mean, because
period that's dead?
yeah, Maury, like it doesn't, yeah. Okay, Joe Rogan.
I have no idea.
I know, because it's like it's not like a job classification that we have now, right? We have a philosophy department, but we don't have like, but it's not like a job that people go out and do. So I've had other people in the past have said Joe Rogan. In my mind, like the people who come to mind for me are like Beyonce. Uh, I've had a number of people who have suggested Kanye thinks of himself as a philosopher, and I think that that's probably true, right? Like he thinks he has this sort of like elevated vision and knowledge of the world. And we can kind of decide or think about like, you know, how reliable are each of these people that we're pointing to. And I think it's really interesting that like all of these people, Joe Rogan, Beyonce, Kanye, all of these people are artists. We don't have anybody who like right now just devotes themselves to thinking and thinking about like possibilities and how do we learn things and how do we know things. Does that help, Maury?
A little bit.
A little bit. It's
Trying to
definitely,
figure
but I
out
definitely
some-
think, yeah, and I definitely think that it's like it's not like I said, it's not the sort of thing that we are sort of prepared for or that we understand in a sort of modern way. It's just not a thing that people do. But Plato, back in the day, one of the things that he's most well known for in terms of his thinking is the idea of the realm of the forms. Have you guys heard about this? Is anybody taking philosophy 101 and talking about the Platonic ideal and Platonic forms? I'm not thinking anybody is, but I just thought I'd ask just in case. I'll give you all a second. No. Okay, so Plato's idea, his ancient Greek idea about how the world works is that before we are born, so before we are like embodied here on Earth, we are all hanging out in the realm of the forms and we see the perfect form of everything. And what I mean by the perfect form of everything is like the perfect form of water bottle and the perfect form of chair and the perfect form of government and the perfect form of love and the perfect form of a human and all of these things. So we're like surrounded by all of these divine and beautiful things before we're born. And then once we are embodied, so once we are born into our bodies here on earth, we forget all of that. And the only way that we can kind of learn the forms again or begin to understand these perfect forms of things is by talking to other people. So that's why when you read the allegory, you'll see that it's a dialogue. It's between two people talking, because that's intentional. That's Plato showing us that the only way we can remember these things is through conversations with other people, and like intentionally turning our thinking toward the light instead of toward the darkness. And there's a lot of darkness and light happening in the allegory of the cave. It's going to be tricky, and there are going to be really weird parts for you to read through. So because of that, what I have done is given you, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. I have given you no. Oh, I hate Zoom class so much. But I'm glad you're all here. Okay. In our assignment for today, so let me go ahead and head over to our Google Classroom. So in our Google Classroom, on our assignment for the day, I have so today is reading a difficult text and thinking about, I can't remember. Thinking about sensory perception. So what I've included for all of you is, if you look, you'll see that I have a PDF of Plato's Allegory of the Cave for you to read. And like I said, it's in a dialogue format, and that's intentional on Plato's part. He wants us to see the discussion taking place. I have also included an evidence interpretation note taker that I want you to use while you are reading the Allegory of the Cave. I'm going to go ahead and open it up so you can see it. What this allows you to do, let me go ahead and move this over. So this is a good tool to use when you're reading a difficult text, and you're going to read lots of difficult texts all through college. That's kind of the way that college works. Like, you have professors who are making you read difficult things and talk about them, and that can be really beneficial. The evidence interpretation note taker makes that easier. So I'm introducing this as a tool to all of you now. So when there you are, Bahaya. So when you get into upper level classes, when you're reading a lot of difficult text and there's something that you're really struggling with, this is a method that you can fall back on to sort of help you think your way through something that's difficult. So all you have to do is, as you can see, this is broken into sections. So we have page or paragraph number, evidence, and interpretation. So I have started you off with, in paragraph 1, I have section on prisoners tied up in the cave since childhood. And my interpretation is, what did they do? Which has always been my question. Like, what did these terrible babies do to get them chained up inside a cave for their whole life? And it is only a thought experiment. It never actually happened. But the first question that I always have is, how come? So I wonder if there's something else going on. Might this be a story not actually literal? And that's true, right? Plato's trying to tell us something about how we learn and how we understand things. So what I want you guys to do is fill this out as you're reading. You don't have to fill out a certain number of things, but anything that you see or read in the text, or something that you are confused by, write it down. And then in the interpretation part, sort of think about what it could possibly mean. This is really useful. And I wish I was there, because if we were doing this in class, y'all would be doing this, and then we would just talk about it. Like, we would talk about the allegory and how things work. And I have to say, like, this is one of my favorite readings that we do over the whole course of the semester. So I'm sad that I'm not there to share it with you all today and talk you through it. but I think that you can do this on your own, no problem. I'm going to just share my screen again. So you've got to go through the evidence interpretation note taker. And again, this is just a worksheet for you to work through, so I can kind of see your thinking process while you are reading. And it's really useful. It's really useful for attacking and kind of reading through challenging texts. So after you've gone through the note taker, then what I want you to do is write a short reflection on what you think about Plato. So what do you understand about what he's talking about? I'm really curious to know how you all kind of see the different parts of the allegory working. Like, what does light mean? What is the cave? Things like that. I'm also curious to know, how do you perceive, my question, how do you perceive meaning in the stories we tell? So this is me sort of pulling this out a bit more to our unit on rhetorical analysis of music. So we're doing analysis in this assignment because we're thinking about the allegory and we're thinking about what it could possibly mean to all of us. When you listen to music, you are learning from that artist about sort of how they understand or see the world or see certain parts of it. So I want you to think about, how do we use stories to help us understand the world around us? And you can answer that in lots of ways. Remember, this is a grading contract class, so I'm just really curious to know what you think. And if this is really confusing, if you think the allegory is really confusing, then you can just say, dude, Maggie, I think the allegory is really confusing and I don't really know what this is about. And then my last question, or my last two questions. So are you in the cave watching the shadows? Are you painful in the bright sun? So if we think about the allegory, we sort of have this movement from being in the dark and not being able to see what's really in front of us, right? We only have these shadows that we can kind of grasp at and name, but we don't really know what they are. And Plato is telling us that, like, with the light, right, if we decide that we want to see the light, we can leave the cave and see the world around us, right? And see if we think back to Platonic philosophy, we can think about returning to the realm of the forms before we die, like being able to sort of remember and see the true form of everything. So I think this is interesting because it gets us thinking about analysis, like things meaning other things, and like how do things work together. But it also gets us thinking about the instrument. If I could go back to Martha Graham for a minute, the instrument by which we learn about the world. Okay. Plato's talking about our body and about how we see and understand things. And he's making a really sort of, without giving it away, he's basically saying we can't trust our bodies. We can't trust our senses. We can't trust what we see or know because we are so limited. We can only see a little bit. And only if we can manage to sort of like break free from our bodies and return to this sort of spiritual realm of the forms can we actually know or understand anything. And I think that's a really sort of interesting thing to suggest. And if you think about it, a lot of Western philosophy from that point on is sort of based around that. Like if you think about religion, most religions sort of start out with this idea that like your body is kind of what holds you on earth. And like in the Christian tradition, it's the body that makes you sinful. So Plato's ideas have kind of kept coming up over time. But I think music is a good example of where that kind of gets challenged, because I definitely feel like, at least in my own life, when I'm listening to music, I'm learning a whole lot about the world around me, and I'm most definitely using my body. I'm listening, I'm feeling, I'm seeing things if there are images attached to it. So I feel like this is a sort of interesting way for us to start out our work on analysis and start out our work on thinking about sensory perception and thinking about how we learn about the world around us from other people and from our bodies. So this one's tricky. So that's what your assignment is today. Let me go ahead and unshare my screen. Do you all have any questions? Do you have any worries or concerns about anything? Are you confused about anything? You can put
There
it in the
were,
chat, or you can, yes, go ahead.
hold on, because I have to see it.
Okay.
There is the evidence, like we have to read and then for every paragraph say something.
You don't have to put something down for every paragraph, Pepe. No. All you have to do is while you are reading, if something strikes you, you can write that down. And
Okay.
and Plato is very weird. Like the language of it is very different because of the fact that, like I said, this is a translation from ancient Greek. This was written like a long time ago when people lived in a very different way than we do now. The remarkable thing about it, at least to me, is that it's interesting. While you're reading this, I want you all to think about all the ways that the cave can be applicable to our lives today. Like how many people that you know are just like sitting around in the dark watching the shadows on the wall instead of actively trying to figure out what's real and what's true. And we can have a discussion maybe when I get back about how that works, right? Like how do we learn about the world around us, and how trustworthy is kind of our bodies and ourselves and giving us that information. But I think that it's interesting to sort of start out this work with this very old, very difficult, very strange reading for two reasons. One, because it's sort of foundational in terms of this is asking you to do analysis from the very beginning, because you have to figure out what all the parts of the allegory are. And two, because of the fact that Plato seems to be asking a lot of questions about education and how we learn about things. You all are in the middle of beginning your first semester here in college, right? Like you're starting to understand and learn about things, hopefully in new and exciting ways. And that can sort of, how can I put it? It can be interesting to sort of think about how you can apply Plato to your own life. And Aaron makes a good point that like leaving the cave is painful. Think about like, if you go to see a movie on a really bright summer day and then you leave the theater and it's like the theater was like completely dark, and then you go outside and you're like in the bright blinding sun, you're like, whoa, my eyes hurt. This is really uncomfortable. So imagine if you had been cramped up in the movie theater for your whole life. It would be uncomfortable and weird to be out in the sun and to have your body be free and to have your eyes be able to see the light. It would be really uncomfortable and painful. And I think that makes a lot of sense. Like, can you all think of something that you learned that caused you pain?
So it's read do the paragraphs, whatever shop, like it's something that got our attention. And then we have to write what we learn, what we have understand about the text, right? That's
Yeah,
it?
like what you interpret from that part of the text. It gives you the moment, it gives you time to sort of stop and think and reflect and then write. I think this might be what he's referencing or talking about. It doesn't have to be right. I just want to see all of you interacting with this difficult, strange text. I'm not looking for correct answers. I'm not looking for all of you to do anything that is super painful. I'm just really curious to see how you all read it.
Okay.
Okay. You guys have any other questions? I will be available over email and on Discord all day today.
Okay.
I'm bringing my laptop with me to the hospital so you guys can ask questions. And that way, I'll be around to help you. Bahia, we are doing more assignments. We have our high stakes assignment on rhetorical analysis of a song that we'll work on more closely when I get back to campus. So you have this assignment, you have the Plato assignment for today. And then on Wednesday, Aaron's gonna go over some stuff about rhetorical analysis of music. And then you'll do an assignment on Google Classroom where you read a rhetorical analysis of a song by Beyonce, and then to give you all an idea of kind of how that works. So that's what Wednesday will look like.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any other questions?
I have a question for Aaron.
Okay. Let me go
She-
ahead and I'm going to stop the recording and then you can talk to Aaron. So it's really good to see all of you. I miss you all so much. We'll talk.
Okay.
I'll be available to all of you and I'll see you next week for sure. So I'm going to stop my recording now. And